Look, the Cleveland Browns are in the middle of a season that's been anything but smooth, and now there's this massive shift happening that could change everything for their rookie quarterback situation. We're talking about a franchise that's been searching for answers, and suddenly an insider is saying that recent changes might actually be opening the door for Shedeur Sanders to finally get his shot. So here's what's going down in Cleveland right now. The Browns just came out of their bye week and they dropped some serious news. Kevin Stefanski, the head coach who's been calling plays on offense, just handed over those duties to offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's an internal coaching change. What's the big deal? But according to NFL insider Ken Carman, this could be exactly what Shedeur Sanders needs to finally see the field this season. Carman went on 92.3 The Fan and basically laid out why this matters for Sanders. His logic is pretty straightforward when you think about it. When you've got a head coach trying to manage an entire team while also calling plays, something's gotta give. The Browns have 4 quarterbacks on their roster right now, and that's a lot of moving parts for one person to keep track of while juggling everything else that comes with being a head coach. Carman's point is that Stefanski physically can't keep his eyes on all 4 guys in that quarterback room when he's got a million other responsibilities. Now here's where it gets interesting for Sanders. Carman's theory is that Tommy Rees has probably been the one working most closely with the younger quarterbacks on the roster. That means Rees has been in the trenches with Dillon Gabriel, who's currently the starter, and with Shedeur Sanders, the highly touted rookie who hasn't taken a single snap in a regular season game yet. So if Rees is now the one calling plays, and he's the one who's been developing that relationship with Sanders, that connection could be huge. The insider didn't mince words either. He straight up said you're gonna see Shedeur Sanders at some point this season, period. His only caveat was, unless Sanders' back injury is so serious that they have to put him on injured reserve, which would obviously shut down any chance of him playing this year. But barring that scenario, Carman is confident that Sanders will get on the field before the season ends. And with Rees now calling plays, someone who Sanders is comfortable with, someone who's been coaching him up, the timing of this change could be everything. But let's pump the brakes for a second and talk about the elephant in the room. Shedeur Sanders has been dealing with a back injury, and it's not some minor thing they're brushing off. This injury kept him inactive in week 8, right before the Browns went into their bye week. So while everyone's speculating about when he'll start, there's a real health concern that has to be addressed first. After practice on Monday, Kevin Stefanski gave an update on Sanders' status, and it wasn't exactly reassuring. Sanders didn't practice on Monday because he's still dealing with that back injury. Stefanski said he's getting better, which is good, but the fact that he couldn't practice coming out of a bye week, that's concerning if you're someone who wants to see this kid play. The whole point of a bye week is to get healthy, to reset, and if Sanders still can't practice after having that extra time off, it raises questions about how serious this injury really is. Now here's where things get a little confusing, and honestly, a bit frustrating if you're a Browns fan or someone rooting for Sanders. After week 8, Sanders himself came out and said his back wasn't really an issue. He made it clear that being inactive wasn't his decision, that he felt healthy enough to play. He even guaranteed he was going to be good. So you've got the players saying one thing and the coaching staff being more cautious, which creates this weird situation where nobody really knows what to believe. Think about it from Sanders' perspective. He's a rookie who was drafted with high expectations. He hasn't played a single snap yet, and now people are questioning whether he's hurt or whether the team just doesn't want to play him. That's gotta be frustrating. He's sitting there saying he's ready to go, but the medical staff and coaches are holding him back. Whether that's the right call or not depends on who you ask, but it's definitely created some tension around the situation. Stefanski acknowledged that the back injury has been disappointing for Sanders, which makes sense. This is a kid who's been working his whole life to get to the NFL, and now he's stuck on the sideline with an injury he doesn't even think is serious enough to keep him out. The hope was that the bye week would give him enough time to heal up and at least be available as the backup in week 10 against the New York Jets. Stefanski mentioned that Sanders came in on Saturday before week 8 with the back injury, and they were hoping he'd be able to move around well enough to suit up on Sunday. They put him through a pre-game warm-up, and apparently he just wasn't ready, but Stefanski kept saying Sanders is getting better every day, and that he's hopeful he'll continue to improve. So what does all this mean for Sanders' chances of actually playing this season? Well, Ken Carman seems to think the coaching change to Tommy Rees calling plays makes it more likely, not less. His argument is that Reese knows Sanders' game. He's been developing him, and now that Reese has more control over the offense, he might be more willing to give the rookie a shot when the time is right. That makes sense on paper, especially if the Browns continue to struggle offensively, which brings us to why they made this change in the first place. The Browns' offense has been a mess this season. There's no other way to put it. They're not scoring enough points. They're not moving the ball consistently. And despite having talented players, nothing's clicking. That's why Stefanski made the decision to hand over play calling duties to Reese. This wasn't some minor tweak. When a head coach gives up play calling, especially one who's had success doing it in the past, like Stefanski, that's a major admission that something needs to change. Stefanski said he's always looking at what they can do better, and he has a ton of trust and faith in Tommy Reese. He said Reese is more than capable and that he's excited for him to take on this role. But let's be real, this move also takes some of the heat off Stefanski. If the offense continues to struggle, at least he can say he tried something different. And if it works, then Reese gets credit for turning things around, and Stefanski looks smart for making the change. For Reese, this is a huge opportunity. He's a relatively young coordinator who came over from Notre Dame, where he was the offensive coordinator there. Now he's getting the keys to an NFL offense, and yeah, it's one that's been struggling, but that also means there's nowhere to go but up. If he can get this offense clicking even a little bit, he's going to look like a genius. And if part of that turnaround involves getting Shedeur Sanders on the field and the rookie playing well, that's only going to boost Reese's reputation even more. But let's talk about the reality of the situation. Dillon Gabriel is still the starting quarterback. The Browns haven't made any indication that they're ready to move on from him, at least not publicly. Gabriel is a veteran who's been in the league, and the team is clearly hoping he can stabilize things and give them a chance to win games. Cleveland is sitting as a 1.5-point underdog on the road against the New York Jets this Sunday, which tells you where Vegas thinks this team is at right now. They're not exactly inspiring confidence. If Gabriel struggles again against the Jets, if the offense continues to look anemic, the calls for Sanders to get a chance are only going to get louder. That's just how it works in the NFL. When the starter isn't getting it done, fans and media start clamoring for the backup, especially when that backup is a high draft pick who hasn't played yet. Sanders has that mystique around him because nobody's seen what he can do at this level. Maybe he's the answer, maybe he's not, but you don't know until you give him a shot. The back injury complicates everything though. Even if the coaching staff wanted to make a change at quarterback, they can't do it if Sanders isn't healthy. And right now, based on him not practicing on Monday, there are legitimate questions about whether he'll even be active for Week 10. The Browns might have to list him as questionable or even inactive again, which would obviously delay any potential debut even further. There's also the question of what happens if Sanders does get healthy and the Browns decide to stick with Gabriel anyway. Does Sanders become the backup? Does he get thrown into a game if Gabriel struggles? Or do they continue to hold him back, citing the injury as a reason to be cautious? These are all scenarios that could play out over the next few weeks, and honestly, none of them are great for Sanders if he's sitting there feeling like he's ready to play. From a team perspective, the Browns are in a tough spot. They're not winning enough games to feel comfortable with their current situation, but they're also not completely out of playoff contention yet. Do they make a change at quarterback to try and spark something? Or do they ride with Gabriel and hope things click with Reese calling plays? It's a delicate balance, and there's no obvious right answer. What makes this situation even more interesting is the fact that Carmen, who's a respected voice in Cleveland media, is so confident that Sanders will play this season. He's not saying it might happen, or it could happen. He's saying it will happen, barring a serious injury that requires IR. That's a pretty bold statement, and it suggests that there are people within or around the organization who believe Sanders is going to get his opportunity at some point. Whether that's because the coaching staff wants to see what they have in him, or because they think he gives them a better chance to win, we don't know, but the fact that this narrative is out there is significant. The other thing to consider is how this all reflects on the Browns' decision-making process. They drafted Sanders with high expectations. They believed he could come in and contribute, maybe even start at some point this season. But here we are in Week 10, and he hasn't played a single snap. Some of that is injury related, sure, but it also raises questions about whether the team properly evaluated his readiness for the NFL. Did they rush him back from an injury during the preseason? Did they not manage his workload appropriately? These are things that only the people inside the building know, but from the outside, it doesn't look great. What's also worth noting is how Sanders has handled this situation publicly. He hasn't thrown anyone under the bus, he hasn't complained about not playing, and when he was inactive in week 8, he made it clear that wasn't his choice but accepted it. That's the right approach for a rookie. You don't want to create drama or put yourself above the team, even if you're frustrated. Sanders seems to understand that, which is a good sign for his maturity and his long-term prospects in this league. The Browns offense desperately needs something to change though. With Reese now calling plays, maybe there's a fresh perspective that can unlock some of the talent they have. Maybe the plays will be different, the tempo will be different, something will feel new, and the players will respond. But if nothing changes, if they come out against the Jets and look just as stagnant as they have been, the pressure is going to mount even more. And that pressure will eventually lead to the question everyone's wondering: when do the Browns give Shedeur Sanders a chance? Ken Carman thinks it's coming sooner rather than later, especially with Reese now in control of the offense. The connection between Reese and Sanders, the fact that Reese has been coaching him up, working with him, that relationship could be the key to getting Sanders on the field. Reese might be more willing to put the rookie in there than Stefanski was, simply because he's more familiar with what Sanders can do. But again, health is the issue. Sanders has to be able to practice. He has to show that his back is good enough to take hits, to move around, to do all the things a quarterback needs to do. If he can't do that, then all the speculation about when he'll play is meaningless. The Browns aren't going to throw him out there if he's not physically ready, and they shouldn't. The last thing they need is for Sanders to aggravate the injury and be out for even longer, or worse, do long-term damage that affects his career. So where does all this leave us? The Browns made a significant change on offense by having Tommy Reese take over play calling duties. An insider believes this is good news for Shedeur Sanders because of the relationship between Reese and the rookie quarterback. Sanders is still dealing with a back injury that kept him out in week 8 and had him not practicing after the bye week, but both he and the coaching staff say he's getting better. The expectation is that Sanders will play at some point this season, as long as his back doesn't require injured reserve. And with the Browns struggling offensively and sitting as underdogs against the Jets, the calls for change are only going to get louder if things don't improve. This is a story that's going to develop over the next few weeks. Every practice report about Sanders' health, every game where the offense struggles, every comment from Stefanski or Reese about the quarterback situation, it's all going to add fuel to the fire. Browns fans are desperate for something to get excited about, and Sanders represents hope. He's the unknown, the potential game changer, the guy who could turn everything around. Whether that's realistic or not remains to be seen, but in the NFL, hope is sometimes all you have when things aren't going well. The bottom line is this coaching change matters. It matters for the offense as a whole, and it especially matters for Shedeur Sanders and his chances of finally getting on the field this season. Tommy Reese taking over play calling could be the catalyst that leads to Sanders getting his opportunity, or it could just be a minor adjustment that doesn't change much of anything. We'll find out soon enough, but one thing's for sure, everyone in Cleveland is watching closely to see what happens next.